So after removing 50,000 screws, well, I soon tired of the screwdriver and switched to a Dremel. But we've ended up with something more sort of universal in shape, something that isn't necessarily an F1 car and could perhaps become something else. Unfortunately, the motor's a lot further forward than I expected. I don't think I'm going to get the flat pickup bed I'd hoped for. I've gone round with a fine marker pen, marked out the radiator grille, all the windows, and most importantly, where I'm going to cut. And here it is now that I've cut it out. I had actually intended to shorten it more than this, but the plans I made before I took the body off the F1 car have changed because of the architecture of what's inside. I now see, because of the size of this extremely odd Chinese steering servo, that I'm going to have to put my radiator grille here in front of the front axle. This huge great upwards protrusion comes bang in the middle of the back of the truck cab if I were to have shortened the body as much as I wanted to. So what I've done is I've shortened it slightly less, so the back of the cab comes here. So here's the body crudely reunited with itself using ABS friendly plumbing glue and lots of reinforcement from offcuts. I think the next thing to do will be to relieve it around the rear of the cab so I can set it down over the chassis and get it down nearer to the right height. It's slowly going down as I cut away more and more material. Let me just show you the side and back. Still needs to go down further. This is the limiting factor. For the moment. If I can get the back any lower, then I'll drop the front a little more. At the moment it's reasonably level. Next, I face the problem of what to do about the front tyres. I like the look of the rear ones, but having the fronts just as wide as the back isn't the look I'm going for. So, firstly I considered the wheels I had left over from when I built my 1932 Bugatti. The trouble with this is that the front wheels are very skinny, the rear wheels are very wide, rather wider than I would like to have on the front of the truck, and the tyres in each case are hard and don't offer much grip. They're for model aircraft. That was a good thing with the rocket car. When you've got a rocket car accelerating under full thrust and if it's getting a bit squirrely, you really want to let it squirrel around a little rather than trying to have it grip, because the possibilities for grip roll are enormous. In the end, I spent $9.97 and I bought these. They're soft rubber, they look a bit grippier, they've got real aluminium centres with nylon hubs which I'm going to have to drill out, and they're narrower than the alternative. For the sake of that narrowness, the grip, and the fact that they have a proper tread and they look like rubber tyres, I splashed out $10 and went for these. I confess I haven't sorted out the wheel bushing problem yet, but it does look a lot better, and the front tyres are slimmer than the rears. And now the question of the radiator grille. For my sheet alloy 1930s Roadster and my Kamtec Ford 32 Coupe, I used a series of vertical uprights to create the grille. But this time I'm going to take a leaf out of RC Everyday's book and use mesh. Back to the question of getting the cab to sit down neatly on the body. I've trimmed away at a few more places and now it will sit down, but it pops back up again when I let go. I've glued the wire grille into place, but I still need to make and install a visual backstop to sit just behind it. The shininess of the wheels had started to annoy me, so I've painted them front and rear. But I need to show you is the means of retaining the cab. Glued some magnets there and a magnet there. Fitted a bolt to the top of which is fitted a steel rivet sold to replace the rivet on the front of your trousers when it falls off. I had to drill it out and I aerolighted it on. To the top of that I aerolighted a magnet. At the back, on the huge protrusion which so annoyed me earlier, is a cut down shelving bracket with a magnet glued to it. And what you can do is just plonk the body on, and it does stay on, though annoyingly I've still got this gap at the left which I'm dying to get rid of. The reason I was able to cut these front body sides to fit so snugly on the wishbones is that on this model the wishbones don't actually move. Instead, the car uses a simple sliding pillar system. The system at the rear completely baffles me. There is movement, pivoting around a point more or less in line with the shaft of the motor, but where the springs are, how they work, I can't begin to imagine, because when you look under the car there doesn't seem to be any mechanical access. So how this thing was put together with a little spring in there, presumably the spring must be extending as I push the car down, is quite beyond me. Still, I'm glad it's there. One more detail, it's a neat little heatsink. Every heatsink I've ever seen has been an aluminium casting. This is a budget toy grade product, so we have a simple mild steel sheet tailored to fit over the motor, and then here slitted and bent one up, one down, one up, one down to increase the surface area and radiate heat. I love it. This is some vertically ribbed plastic sheeting. I can't remember where I got it. I don't know where to get any more. I've been using it to make headlamp lenses. But today I had an idea. I cut a piece exactly the size of the radiator backstop, painted it black in the hopes that the vertical ribbing will suggest a radiator. I've done this because I'm being forced to put the backstop much further forward than I usually do, hard up behind the grille, a compromise made necessary by my magnetic body mounting system. Okay, so now for the subject of paint. I want to paint this to look rusty. I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube about how to do that. People have suggested painting it the top colour first, sprinkling it with salt, then spraying on rust, then washing off the salt. A lot of people have got a lot of different techniques out there. I've seen a guy who sprinkles paprika onto the fresh paint, but I had a go at it myself before I watched any of the videos, and I'd like to show you the result. This is my Kamtec 1932 Ford Coupe, and the way in which I painted it is actually different from any of the suggestions which I saw on YouTube. First I painted the car with the same flat red primer which I have already used on the Model Y. Then I chose a colour for the car, the colour it would have been before it had rusted, and sprayed, this is all done with rattle cans, small amounts of the colour onto the car. Once I'd got my basic combination of those two colours, I mixed up some acrylic brown, some acrylic orange and some acrylic black with a great deal of water, and splodged them onto the car so that the globules of water shrank away from the plastic painted finish, and then I just put it in the sun until all the water evaporated. I then added a bit of a dark acrylic wash, just cheap acrylic paint mixed with lots of water in other areas as well. This is what I've come up with. Let's just fit it. It certainly doesn't offer me too much ground clearance. I decided that this truck should have been green when it came out of the factory, and as a result I've given it some green, trying to keep it more on the vertical surfaces and keep any horizontal surfaces fairly free of original colour, in the hopes that it'll look as though wherever dew or rainwater settled it tended to rust more. Once this thing is finished, I'm going to need someone to drive it, and here's the guy I had in mind. He's a 5-inch action figure, but he does need a seat. This is what I've made. It spans the cab. He sits there with cable ties across his thighs holding him in. So here's our driver, cable tied into his seat and clutching an improvised electrical flex steering wheel. Headlights. I've cut the tips from 2 marker pens, which I bought specifically because their ends were this rounded shape, and sprayed them. That's all I've done so far, except to poke a Dremel in here and cut away these reinforcing flanges a little. Marker pen tips for the headlamp shell, polycarbonate spoon for the lenses, tin foil for the reflectors, and rusty wire to mount them. Here are the light buckets once they've been drilled, as it were, and glued. I'll sort that line out later. There's the spoon from which I've packed the lenses. There you go. Headlamps ready to be fitted to the truck. So the lights are on, and I've glazed the windscreen, the 2 small side windows and the rear window, leaving just the big side ones untouched. So the next thing to do to this is to install the door handles. After that I'll fit the driver in place, and then we'll move on to the back body, which still has to be mounted. To liven up the back of the bed, I've cut these Ford letters out. I'm going to glue them to this piece of cardboard, paint it to match the rest, and then stick it onto the back of the bed. Here's the finished back body ready to be fitted. It's made of a sort of thick, very stiff cardboard. In the UK we think of it as pasteboard. And I've stiffened it up where it's weakest here with bamboo popsicle sticks. It's got its Ford logo on the back, and here are pieces of 7x7mm pine with holes drilled in precisely the right place to coincide with these existing screw holes in the bottom of the chassis. So all I have to do is position it, nip up the screws, and it's firmly retained. Time for a couple of confessions. Firstly, the front wheel bushes, despite my heroic attempts to drill them out to less than 0.5 millimetre of thickness, collapsed. I got them out to 5.5mm, and when I tried to go further they just fell apart. So the front wheels are a bit of a wobbly fit. The other confession? My rat rod's got cataracts. I know that superglue fogs polycarbonate, so I used clear 2-part epoxy resin to glue my improvised teaspoon headlamp lenses onto the marker pen headlight shells. It looked great overnight with the foil behind, and in the morning they'd both gone opaque. Because I've glued them on with epoxy, I'd have to use a Dremel to get them off. I think for the moment at least I'm just going to try and live with it. Well, there it is. I think it's finished. I wanted to film a more interesting test drive for my rat rod than the F1 car got, and so I took it on my summer holiday, meaning to film a drag race between the truck and my rocket-propelled Bugatti monoposto. My wife and I carefully set up a line of traffic cones and our 3 cameras. I lit the fuses on the Bugatti's rockets, grabbed the truck's transmitter and waited. Suddenly the rocket car tore off along the strip. I squeezed the trigger on the truck's transmitter and the truck shot off backwards. I released the trigger and tried again, more gently. This time the truck went forwards, but I lost control and spun out. By this time the rocket car was having problems of its own, having veered off course when only one of its second stage rockets fired. You'll see this clearly in the quadcopter footage. We didn't actually have a quadcopter, so we made one from a ladder and an open car. Here's the drag race.
So